If you got big dreams and bad genes, you are in the right place. Bromley shirts are available at barbellapparel.com. Link is in the description.
Kyriakos Grizzly, the Greco god of bloat, the Grecian embodiment of male passion. You do not become a meme like Kyriakos from being just a regular ass dude training the way you like and minding your own business unless you check some boxes, and he checks all of them and then some. He's got the thick neck, the rotund belly. He's so dense, he looks like something you would strap to the front of a battering ram while you're storming the castle. He's got the primitive, guttural noises that leave his throat when he concludes an epic training set. That would tell some primitive society that, hey, you're late for paying your fee for me to not come down off the mountaintop and swoop up all your women. He's got the ridiculous movements that just defy all modern training wisdom. And if that wasn't enough, he also has a ton of strength to go along with it that makes professionals in the field scratch their head. So we've seen a ton of reaction videos. It's fun to watch guys with PhDs and pro bodybuilders and anybody else in this field just look in wonderment about what the hell is going on in a Kyriakos workout. And I'm gonna take this from a different angle. I'm actually gonna pick apart his training and I'm gonna see if it's any damn good. I'm gonna see if we have any utility from this, and I'm going to try to get to the bottom of if Kyriakos is actually justified in doing this type of work. Maybe he's smarter than we all thought. So there are 4 questions we're gonna ask. We're gonna go into what his training is actually like. We're gonna ask, is it any good? Like, just generally, is there value to this? We're gonna ask why it actually does work for him. We're gonna take into account his special circumstances. And number 4, we are going to ask how we can use it. Just for funsies, because of course training should be fun if you want to use any of these movements, but also if you have any goals that might benefit from these movements that you're not really aware of. We're going to get into that. So let's start out what the man, the myth, the legend actually does, what his training is like. Some of the movements that we see the most often are the Zercher seated shrug. We see him doing very explosive high pulls. We see him doing squat good morning variations with kind of comically shallow depth. Same thing with bent rows. We see him do these really explosive belly bench presses, behind the back wrist curls. That's one of my favorite. Sled pushes. He does a lot of GPP. It looks like he stretches. He's actually got insane flexibility. Medicine ball slams, boxing, heaving 440 pounds into a heavy bag. Man, that is somebody you do not want to mess with. That would be like taking a haymaker from Apollo himself. So firstly, everything he does has a ton of effort. Either it's heavy, overloaded, partial, strongest range of motion, slapping on a ton of weight, just trying to survive, or it's something that is very explosive, both with weights and also some of the GPP stuff he does. So it's this difference between strain and speed, and he seems to prioritize both of those, and they both require a ton of effort. You can tell the man loves going hard. And of course, they're mostly compound movements. You get the most bang for your buck. If your training revolves entirely around movement patterns as opposed to isolation, then all you have to do is chart progress in the movement, provided you're doing it a certain way. And you are also going to track alongside with that general physical development in the form of size and strength. So everything, compound movements done with a ton of effort, partial range of motion, or highly explosive. And that just seems to be the gig. It's like how a power lifter might train, just focusing on the main lifts, except the types of lifts he selects are very bizarre to us. They don't seem like they would be kind of the optimal choice, the optimal execution for anybody that's trying to get bigger and stronger. And the way he approaches them is just with absolute maximal effort. So those two things, on the one hand, can create a very good environment for growth. They seem to satisfy his preference for his love of training, which that's going to make just about anything you do viable in some way. Now, the question is it any good? Are his weird executions of movement, his weird selections, his fixation on overloaded movements with just too much damn weight, is that good, or would he be better off, I don't know, maybe taking the weight down a little bit, maybe testing some disadvantaged positions, maybe getting muscles into the lengthened position? Let's get into it. First of all, we have to understand what he's doing with these movements. When you have a movement that's done with a ton of weight or in an explosive fashion, you're primarily focusing on neurological adaptations. So that's great for motor recruitment, getting a lot of motor units recruited and doing so very, very quickly. That's how you get stronger, more explosive. However, it's not the type of motor recruitment you generally want for hypertrophy. So for a muscle growth standpoint, the obvious thing that's missing here is the length and muscle position, the range of motion, because talking about bang for the buck, that's one of the easiest ways to guarantee that you are going to grow more from the work you're doing. Now, it seems to be absent because of the history of injuries that he's had. So he seems to have tweaked these movements to suit what he feels comfortable with. He feels safer, more secure in more partial ranges of motion, and he can push those without negative effects, or so it seems. Now, for the average person doing these types of movement, yeah, you're going to see physical development. You will get strong, but there's a question of, are you going to get specific strength, meaning you're going to get better at these movements, or are you going to get general strength, meaning strength that carries over to other things, because those are two different things. Take, for example, a bench press. If you were to stop doing full range and just do partial bench presses, over a few months, you would get really, really, really good. In fact, the best bencher in the world, Julius Maddox, probably isn't doing lockouts with that much more than his full range bench. But if you take a seasoned equip bencher who's used to doing lockouts with excess of 1,000 pounds, they probably don't bench 800 pounds raw. In fact, they almost certainly don't. So you have the capacity to get very, very strong in some of these movements without it necessarily bleeding over to other stuff. However, if you progress it to some ridiculous capacity, it stands to reason that there is going to be some inevitable general strength carryover that comes from that. So for hypertrophy, this stuff isn't great. For strength and power, it's pretty good, but it's probably very specific in the short term to these particular movements. And depending on you and the movement, it's probably not going to carry over exactly the way you want. Now, if talking about something specific, it stands out to me that these are very good specific exercises for something like strongman, where you do have to be very explosive through your whole body, and you do have to be very, very strong at the lockout, at the most mechanically advantaged positions. So you can break these exercises down, like the explosive brute movements, the high pulls, the jerks. They're similar to something like a power clean or a snatch, a whole body explosive movement. And you can look at other developmental movements like croc rows. You can look at things like explosive pushing movements, bench throws, explosive push-ups, throws, slams, and so on. All of these are really good for developing kind of a well-rounded strongman athlete. And you'll see a lot of these in strongman specific training, because on top of the other developmental stuff, it actually carries over quite a bit. The partial and overload stuff, strongmen are all about it. We will do things like overhead pin supports to get our log or axle lockout better. We'll do a lot of partial deadlifts, great for optimizing hip extension. And so much of general athleticism is essentially the quarter hinge or quarter squat position, that if you get really, really strong there, that carries over to a lot of real world strength and athletic development. We do a lot of things like yoke and farmer stuff, which is huge on upper back and midsection support. So a lot of these movements actually do have quite a bit of carryover to a general strength development. However, it really should probably be in addition to other things that are going to round you out a bit more. So that brings us to a question: why does this seem to work for him? So why do you have somebody who is able to build so much mass, build so much strength, who did so using things that are hyper specific to this kind of really explosive or really overloaded type of exercise execution that isn't really associated with hypertrophy? Well, we got a couple things. For one, the caloric surplus. He's a bloat lord for a reason. If you take any human being who eats perfectly like a bodybuilder and maintains a reasonable body fat, that person is always 100% of the time going to hold more mass if they just ate like complete shit and got to 30% body fat. That's just a fact. Now, whether or not you want to do that is a different question. But being the bloat lord, keeping your insulin levels jacked through the roof, flirting with type 2 diabetes, that is actually a really viable way for building a lot of muscle. It's also a really viable way for not living that long or being able to function in your day-to-day life, so not recommended, but it is a factor for why he is able to be as big and strong as he is. Two, you have his history. He was a general lifter for a long time, and he did traditional training, and he probably built a lot of size and strength doing that. My understanding is he picked these movements because they work around his issues. He had gotten a lot of injuries. Makes sense if you're doing full range of motion with the type of intensity and reckless power that he does. Seems like it would be a recipe for wear and tear if you're not being very careful in programming when you go heavy and when you take it easy. This doesn't strike me as a guy that likes deloads. Three, you got drugs. There's probably a lot of drugs here, and that's going to play a role. And four, you have genetics. Of course, not all of us have the ability to be the bloat lord. That's just, you got to be blessed at birth. There has to be some Harry Potter level incident when you're a newborn to grant you this type of power. And of course he has it. So if you have the fact that he's very developed from traditional training, you have the insane caloric surplus, you have the fact that he loves to train, so he's doing this to the nth degree, forget if it's fucking optimal or not. And then you add drugs and genetics, and you have a recipe for somebody getting very big and very strong with what you might consider suboptimal training.
Are you looking for access to exclusive programs from the best minds in the field and some of your favorite YouTube influencers? then look no further than Boost Camp. Boost Camp is a long-term sponsor of this channel, and I wouldn't be partnered with them if they didn't provide a great product. If you want optimal performance, you cannot just wing your weight selection. You have to make deliberate steps forward, so you need a program and you need a way to track progress on it. They make it easy to track your workouts from the convenience of your phone, so you never have to rely on your sloppy handwriting or your bad memory. And they give you access to a library of exclusive programs from some of the most well-known names in the business. Eric Helms, Bryce Lewis, Jeff Schofield, Bald Omni-Man, and yours truly. We all have programs up there that can only be found on the app, and it is absolutely free. My programs, Bull Mastiff and 70s Powerlifter, are both up there, and you can also check out Full Sturker, which tells you how to get strongman jacked using the things you find in a corporate gym. So special thank you to Boost Camp for making this channel possible. Unburden yourself from the hard business of making the perfect program from scratch. We've got them pre-made for you. Download their app right now by clicking the link in the description.
This also takes us to my most hated phrase, which is optimal, because people intuitively think that there's a binary. It's a 0 or a 1, a yes or a no. You're either making gains that are optimal or you're just spinning your wheels and you're stuck in plateau land forever. That, of course, is not how it goes. The name of the game is not doing the most perfect training that gets you the hypothetical most amount of growth in the next 6 weeks compared to anything else you could do. The goal is to find something that allows you to make some growth and then figure out how to do that again and again and again. So even if something is theoretically not as good for hypertrophy or strength, if it gives you some and you can progress it, you have the potential to go very, very, very far. And worrying about that is infinitely more important than worrying about, did I get 5% more growth than if I did this other thing that I read about last week? That is how you spin your wheels and do absolutely nothing. So the lesson of the day from the bloat god himself: find something that is viable, that checks some big boxes that you just really fucking love to do. And if you do it for a long time, guess what, Chief? You are going to turn into an absolute unit. And that's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about because it seems bro sciencey, or like there's a better way, we just have to find it. Well, you're going to be in your 50s having lost your window to be good if you spin your wheels trying to pick apart perfect training. Do not let perfect be the enemy of good. It is not either optimal or nothing. That is ridiculous. So moving on, we know what he does. We know how it affects him. How can we use it? That's a really important question. And I think it really has the most to do with what your immediate goals are. If there are certain things that appeal to you, you just want to do them just because, you can kind of pick apart what body parts they hit, what movement patterns they seem to go with, and incorporate them accordingly. So that's pretty easy to do. This seated Zercher shrug is going to be heavy on the traps, the upper back, and the midsection. So that obviously should assist anything that looks like a spinal loading day, a squat or a deadlift day, or if you're a strongman, an event day, because that's going to be heavily taxing on your nervous system. And it's going to be hard to really do that throughout the week or have other squat and deadlift days that are on the back end of that. Everything else, pretty straightforward. I mean, his benching style, you could theoretically incorporate that. I think his bench press actually has a use case for competitive benchers because his elbows stay tucked, he brings it low, and he almost does a front raise. So it's heavy on the front delt. That's a maneuver that a lot of benchers use anyways, trying to arc the weight back up over their face. And he got very good at doing it in an explosive style. I'm not a fan of really trampolining bench presses off of my chest. Talking about wear and tear, results are going to vary with that one. But as far as the actual movement itself, I actually think it's a somewhat viable accessory exercise to somebody who wants to build up a big bench. The partial rows, squat, good mornings, again, getting very, very strong through a limited range of motion can be an immensely useful asset in addition to some more well-rounded training. And it's super easy to throw this stuff in. If there are multiple upper back movements that you do, you can have a short, heavy overloaded row in addition to regular pull-ups, dumbbell rows, and so on. And you're going to be checking a lot of boxes, and you're going to have the capacity to get a new amount of strength in addition to whatever other growth you get. You just have to be careful with things like squat and good mornings because, again, we're talking about a lot of systemic stress and it might pull away from other things you're doing. All right, the high pull. This is probably one of the most useful exercises from a full body strength perspective, and something that most of you would be justified in doing anyways. There's a lot of hip extension, a lot of upper back and trap work. The arms are engaged. This is what I do if I'm getting ready for like a bag toss. By loading this and progressing this, your hips are going to learn to be faster. You're going to be a mutant at transferring force through your upper body. Traps, shoulders, arms are going to grow. There's just no doubt about it. And again, if this assists something that has more traditional methods, where there is more tension on the muscle, there is more of a full range of motion, then I think you have the capacity to potentially do something really nasty. But you have to love this movement. You have to take it seriously. You have to do it for quite a long time. Then again, there are the GPP movements, the accessories, boxing. He does a lot of stretching, a lot of slams. God, the sled pushes. These are just hard, explosive, all-out efforts. These are all probably very limited in how taxing they are, probably contribute to his conditioning, probably make him a better lifter for it, and make him surprisingly conditioned and athletic for somebody that is built like Kirby. So again, picking something that checks some of the big boxes that you love doing, that you progress, that is how you do it. You don't need the perfect Metcon. You don't need the perfect GPP day. You need to go out, get your heart rate up, and put some effort out. If you can do that, and if you can progress it, you are going to be a mutant. You're going to be paying homage to the Bloat God himself. So some of the takeaways here. 1, love of training makes up for so much it's not even funny. 2, optimal isn't a real thing. There's always better tweaks you can make and changes you can do to try to take your training into more productive territory, but that should be very, very small changes as you take notes and as you retain the things that work, not jumping around from one thing to another because you're having FOMO. That's not what training is. Kyriakos loves to train, he loves the movements he does, and he just breaks himself against them. He takes them until the wheels fall off. That's really the message here, because heavy-handed approaches work as long as you're consistent and as long as you can recover from them. The other takeaway is how these movements carry over to more general strength. If you're a strongman, there's a lot of value to get out of this. If you just like lifting heavy shit occasionally, there's absolutely room to sprinkle some of this stuff in. Although, if you have a more dedicated specific goal, you want to make sure that the movements are actually selected for that. So you might even find yourself making more tweaks to make these more specific to what it is that you're actually trying to do. Always think critically. Always ask yourself, is this getting me closer or further away than what I'm trying to do? So that's all I got for today, guys. That is my breakdown of the Bloatlord, of Kyriakos Grizzly, the man who lives, who trains for the difficult. Tell me what you think. Have you done any of this stuff? Did you find any value in it? Did you get injured? Did it snap your shit up? Let me know what you think of Kyriakos' training. Has he inspired you to be a better man? Did you call your parents that are estranged you haven't talked to in 20 years after watching one of his training videos? Let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.